Brian Ella. I will chair the hearing this morning. At this point, I first of all want to introduce the other members of the Governor's Council. To my right is Councilor Eileen Duff. Next to her is Councilor Joseph Ferrara, and seated next to me, Councilor Robert Juvie. To my left is Councilor Terrence Kennedy, and next to him is Councilor Paul DePaoli. And good morning, Mr. Koonce. And we're attorney
Timothy Foley.
Timothy Foley. First of all, I'd like to read a letter. Well, the other thing too is, unless you're speaking, I would appreciate it if everyone would have their mask on. Okay? If you're speaking, you can take it off because it may be difficult to hear. First of all, I'd like to read a letter dated January 12th, 2022, addressed to the Governor's Council. Dear Councilors, I submit for your advice and consent my decision to commute the sentence of Thomas E. Koonce. Mr. Koonce is currently in state custody, having served 30 years of a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the first-degree murder of Mark Santos on July 20th, 1987. Mr. Koonce's commutation was favorably recommended to me by the Advisory Board of Pardons. The board's report and recommendation is attached for your review and the several attachments referenced in the report. Pursuant to the power granted by the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights, I commute Mr. Koonce's sentence to that for second-degree murder as such that he will become eligible for parole immediately. And I know there are folks on webcam, there are some witnesses will be on webcam. There's other folks watching it on YouTube. For those folks and for you folks here, it's extraordinary. It's very unusual, like almost never happens when a governor commutes a sentence. And in simple terms, when a governor commutes a sentence, that means he's reducing the sentence. In this case, Mr. Koonce was convicted for first-degree murder. And in Massachusetts, first-degree murder means that you're in prison for the rest of your life without a chance of parole. So it's usually extraordinary circumstances. Sometimes inmates have prevented a riot in a prison. Sometimes people have been exemplary inmates. So it's very unusual. This is the first commutation that the governor has brought forward to the council since his over 7 years in office. So what happened in this situation, very briefly, Mr. Koonce, through his attorney at the time, I don't believe it was Mr. Foley, filed a petition for commutation. That, I believe, was in 2010, and it was denied. Okay, so he applied again to have his sentence reduced. And this time, the Board of Pardons, and it's really the parole board, but it's the parole board, but when they decide commutations, they go into a certain section, and they're called the Advisory Board of Pardons. But in simple terms, it's the parole board. And the parole board, we had a hearing at the parole board several months ago, and they recommend that his sentence be reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. Why is that important? Because second-degree murder means someone is eligible for parole after 15 years. And as we all know, Mr. Koonce has been incarcerated well over 15 years. So the Board of Pardons, the Advisory Board of Pardons recommended his sentence been commuted, and then Governor Baker agreed with that, and that's why we're here today. So what happens, just to give you again an overview, the Governor's Council will have this hearing today. Somewhere in the next week or 2 or 3, we will vote. And let's assume that we vote favorably. It doesn't mean at that point that Mr. Koonce is free. All that means is his sentence has been reduced from first-degree to second-degree murder. And at that point, he has to go back to the parole board, and he's got to ask for to be paroled. Generally, and I have spoken to several members of the parole board, what generally happens, he'll probably have a hearing, or probably within 2 months, if we give him a favorable decision. The reason I say 2 months, the parole board, because it's second-degree murder, would have to give 30-day notice for a hearing. They have to notify the victim's family. So once they have the hearing, which will probably be, say, 2 months, 6 weeks after, if he's voted favorably by the council, he'll have a hearing at the parole board. And if, at that point, they'll have the hearing, and they have about 30 days after that to write their decision. Well, it could be 45 days, but give or take. And they're going to want to know, what's his plan? If we release him, what's he going to do? Does he have a job? Who's he going to live with? And they all want to make sure that they're satisfied with that. And if that works well, then he's a free man. So the bottom line is, if he's voted favorably by this council, he will probably be a free man, I would say, in about 4.5 months. So I just wanted to give you an overview. If you didn't know, I hoped it helped. At this point, I also want to acknowledge the presence of Councilor Marilyn Petito Devaney, seated all the way to my right. And before we hear from Mr. Koonce, I have a list of witnesses. Some of the witnesses are present today, and some are on webcam. So I have a list given to me by Mr. Koonce's lawyer, and I will follow the order of that list. First, we're going to hear from the virtual folks, Pastor Don Horstman. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can. I can hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to make a brief presentation as to why you believe Mr. Koonce's commutation should be granted.
Yes, I knew Thomas Koonce as his chaplain at MCI Norfolk. I worked, I just recently retired from the Department of Correction. I worked for 36 years. I was a correction program officer for 14 and a Protestant chaplain for the last 22 years. And so I understand the importance of security as well as treatment. And when I first arrived, I was at Norfolk for my last 8 years. I came in 2011, right after he got denied the first commutation. And I didn't know it at the time, but you wouldn't have known from his attitude and behavior that his commutation got denied. It didn't, I know it hurt, and I know it hurt deeply, but he still went forward. He persevered. He showed just a tremendous, I think, mental toughness when I look back at that. One of the great qualities about Tommy was he was very teachable. And I was there for a particular purpose. And I saw him my first week there. And I asked him, I said, can we start meeting together? Because he stood out immediately to me. And we continued to meet as much as we could, almost for the next 8 years. I think I was about a week and a half short of 8 years being there. We tried to meet every week, but we met only, it ended up being like twice a month because of, for different reasons. Tom's accountability was, he himself was his own accountability. It was unbelievable. Tom only received 2 disciplinary reports in his whole career there, and his whole time there. And that's like miraculous. That's like miraculous. If you know all the rules and regulations of the department, oh my goodness. And people making up their own rules, and it's crazy. I mean, if there were D reports for staff, I would have probably got over 100, you know, and he only got 2. He's just amazing, just amazing. Tommy was somebody who just, I think his emotional maturity stood out in terms of being the adult in the room. I mean, he just, he didn't talk behind people's backs. He would go directly to them. He would confront other men in state prison, which isn't a normal thing, because it was what was right, and it was the right thing to do. He walked with men just on almost a daily basis. And at first he was a little bit out of balance. He was almost like we call it in ministry, like a ministry-aholic. You know, he has a little Christian cape on there, and he was going to save the prison. And as time went on, he realized he just can't do everything, that he just has to do his part. And he learned to calm down and enjoy himself and have a little bit of fun. But I think the biggest change, which I was a part of, was the healing. I think when I arrived, I think that's why God shut the door on the first commutation. When men come to state prison, and this is a often neglected part, their inner person is broken. The Bible calls it really the soul or the heart. And Isaiah 61, it talks about the brokenhearted. And what happens is when the heart breaks or the inner person breaks, that's the mind, emotion, and will, it causes wrong thinking, it causes wrong emotions, and then the will attaches itself to all sorts of wrong behavior. And I think Tommy at first he thought he wasn't, in some ways, wasn't like the other guys, and that was true, but it also wasn't true. And he was so focused on helping others that he was missing that. And over time, he saw that he had some terrible things that happened to him, which he kind of passed by, and he went back to go forward, and we worked on that. And it's kind of the key is forgiveness. You go back, you process trauma, you talk about it, and then you forgive. And then the other area which the restorative justice helped him with was the issue. The other side of healing is what you've done to other people. And this is very important. And so he had to, through the restorative justice program, he had to speak about and process what he did, especially in this crime, and what he did in terms of just even carrying a gun around in society, and as he was doing, and what he did to the victim and how it affected their family. And I watched him just go. I think the best word would be deeper. And he went through really the inside out process of maturity, which oftentimes most people I know in and out of prison never go through that, and they don't do that. And then it got powerful. It got amazing. His effect on other people began to increase. He began to just help others at a much deeper level and understand how to help others. And the last thing I want to say is one of the things I told the men when I worked there is if you get out of prison and you live a selfish life, and even if you stay out of prison, that's a failure with a big F. And I'd rather have you come back where you serve God and help others. That's not the case here. Tommy doesn't care about money. He doesn't care about fame, notoriety. Even in the prison, he was able to organize events and just stand in the background as other people stood up front and got all the attention. But this is what I believe Tommy's going to do. I believe he's going to spend the rest of his life leading others through a process of change and transformation, leading them just into a process of healing, and then really meeting them where they are, and then eventually releasing them to the world to make a difference. That's what he wants to do the rest of his life, and that's why I recommend him. I really believe he's ready, gentlemen, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I can't. I lost.
In prison for a long time, and then they come out into society, they have a very difficult time adjusting. How do you think Mr. Koonce is going to do with that?
Is that for me, sir?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I lost you just for a minute.
You lost me. I'll repeat the question then, Pastor. First of
Okay.
all, as I said, I appreciate your testimony. It means a lot.
Yeah.
as somebody who's been so ingrained in the system for so many years, you've had the opportunity to see many inmates go through the prison system, get paroled, and go out back onto the street. And, you know, one of the things I've seen as a criminal defense lawyer for the last 38 years is when people do that, they have a very difficult time adjusting into society. How do you think Mr. Koonce is going to do with that? I know you talked about how he's going to be out there helping people, but there's another part to that. There's living in the world.
Absolutely, sir.
There's
Absolutely.
using technology you haven't never seen or been access to. There's, you know, different kinds of foods out there that weren't there when he went to jail 30 years ago. Everything under the sun. How do you think he's going to handle that adjustment? It's going to be
well, I think that's difficult for everybody. But I think what he has in his favor is he's gone through the healing process. He has emotional maturity. And so that's not going to be against him. He has support. He has a lot of support out there. That's going to be difficult for everybody. But in his case, I think he'll be fine. It's going to take a little bit of time. I think one of the things
you would agree with me, Pastor, that when they first get out is the time that they're likely to fail.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's so true. It's such a huge issue, sir. I know one man who went out and came back, and he told me he had an apartment in Boston, and he set up his apartment like his cell in Boston, and he had stuff on the windowsills. He had all his toiletries in his bedroom, not in the bathroom, and his parents came by and they could see it, but he couldn't see it. I know another person who was at the mall who got out of prison, and he asked the security guy if he could use the bathroom. I know another man who was he was having a hard time staying out staying out late at night because of the 10 p.m. count. He felt just so uncomfortable. And the stories go on in terms of guys not being able to cross the street, getting the
specifically, Pastor, with respect to Mr. Koonce,
yeah.
How do you think he's going to handle those issues?
Well, I know there's several other guys who I know who were paroled. George Vicente being one of them, whom I'm in touch with, and Jesus Linares, who wrapped up his sentence. Miguel Angel Reyes. I've been in touch with all of them, and they all talked about an adjustment. But because of support and because of the emotional maturity, and because they've dealt with their stuff, and because of the character that they developed, the adjustment was difficult but a lot easier, and it didn't cause them to trip up. It didn't cause them to end up back in prison. And Angel Reyes has been out for 5 years. George has actually only been out a year. I think Jesus Linares, has been out 4 years, and they're all doing good, things like that. I think one of the things Tommy has in his favor, and you may view this as a negative thing, but he's not like going home to a wife and children and those pressures. He's going out there as an individual. His son has grown up. I hope down the road, God brings somebody into his life. But I do believe he'll be okay with that. But you are absolutely right. It's difficult for everybody.
Well, I appreciate your testimony. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councilor Jubenville has a question for you, Pastor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pastor, for your kind words. If he's successful here, he'll go back to the parole board, and then he'll, in all likelihood, get parole. So he'll be on parole for probably the rest of his life, correct?
He could be. Yeah. I know sometimes I've seen guys maybe after about 18, 20 years, they put in for it, and sometimes they'll release them from that. But it's going to be a long time, sir. Yes.
So does he get any support from the parole system when he's on parole?
I know in terms of, I know obviously he's monitored by parole. Obviously he's, they don't so much, I don't think, help him. I'm not 100% sure because I worked in the prison system. I never worked for parole, but I know that, just like George Vicente, who's been out for a year, I know his parole officer has been supportive, but usually the men have to pursue employment themselves and things like that. and again, that can be a difficult thing. But I think Tommy, with his connections and everything else, George Vicente, by the way, is in seminary at Harvard. He got accepted, and he works at the Harvard Library. He just started working there, and he got all A's his first semester. So amazing young man. Second degree murder case in Brockton when he was 17 years old. So, these guys, but again, I think the key is, sir, that they've done the work prior to coming out. They've done the intense work. They've built their character as much as they can in prison. And they've done the emotional healing and developed, I think one of the most important things is emotional maturity. They view things, they're not children. They're not emotionally. And I've seen, well, we won't get into the other side of that, but I'm not that sure about parole and what they do, but I don't think they necessarily help find jobs and things like that, sir.
Well, it is my experience dealing with parole officers many years ago that the parole officer would find employment for people on parole.
Yeah.
Would find an apartment for them to live in if they needed it. And would check in on the parolee from time to time, usually once a week or so, to make sure they were doing okay.
Yeah.
That's not available anymore?
I'm not sure about that. I know corrections has some programs out there that help men, but sometimes guys, so, and they can do that, but I'm not sure at the present time because like I said, I worked in the prison and not with parole.
Because a lot of people that I know that are on parole have a tough time getting employment because of the stigma of having been in the prison.
Yes.
And it's difficult
Yeah.
for employees.
Yeah. Well, I know that Jesus Linares, who is now in Florida, he was able to get employment. He's working. Miguel Angel Reyes is also working. As a matter of fact, he's with a guy where they're going to start he's joining a guy to be like his business partner. Actually, he's got that entrepreneurial spirit. I know George just got out. What he was able to get initially was working at KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, working there part-time. But then he got a full boat, and not only did he get into Harvard, but they actually paid for it. They're paying full boat for it, and it's amazing. And now he's working, like I said, at the Harvard Library. So it does take time, but you're right. Obviously, the people are leery to hire someone with a felony, but there's also connections to the Christian community, the local church. The Christian community understands that really God can change people, really from the inside out. And there's many examples of that. And they sometimes, with their connections, can help guys get employment also. I've seen that over and over and over again.
Thank you, Pastor.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Pastor.
Yeah.
Pastor Joseph Ferreira has a question for you.
Yes.
Thank you for being here today. I have a question. So I was a police officer for 30 years, and I've seen both sides. In 2008, a guy named Dominic Sinelli told the parole board he was a changed man. And he was paroled for an armed robbery conviction. He went on to kill a Woburn police officer
Yes.
in the last days of his duty.
Yeah.
How can you help us predict the future, like what Mr. Koonce is going to do, and assure us that he won't be one of those guys?
Yes. And I think, honestly, everybody who worked in the prison at that time system who knew Dominic Sinelli knew he was a phony, and he fooled the parole board. If you went to the staff at MCI Norfolk and you asked them about Thomas Koonce, even correction officers who really don't like inmates would say he's a stand-up guy. He's, as we say, a citizen. He's not a solid con. He's a citizen. He's a real deal because he's done the work. He's shown it. Now, how do you know someone's heart? Only God truly knows. However, there's two main things. The Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, but also from the heart comes our actions. And when you see years and years of Tommy Koonce helping other people, when you see years of a positive attitude, when you see you see only 2 D reports, that's miraculous. I don't, you may not understand, but I understand what you're saying, sir. I understand what you're saying, and I love the fact you're a police officer, but Tommy need to be locked up. These guys need to be locked up first. They need to be gotten under control. Then they go through the process. And I really believe, from my opinion, and I think a lot of the people would support me, even correction officers who don't even like him or like inmates, that he's the real deal.
Thank you. Thank you for your service as a CO. That means a whole lot.
Yeah, thank you.
I've never done that job myself. So thank you for your service and thank you for your help in the prison.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Marilyn Petito Devaney has a question for you.
Yes.
It's tied down.
Okay.
You can hear you.
I'd like to ask, what do you think is the biggest problem?
I can't hear you, ma'am.
Huh?
I can't hear you.
What do you think is the greatest quality that Thomas has?
Could you speak up a little bit? You're kind of breaking up. I'm sorry.
What's the greatest quality he has?
Oh, the greatest quality, huh? Boy. I think at this point, character quality is, like I said, he's his own accountability. He didn't need the correction officers. And he used to get on the young guys for taking shortcuts. He doesn't take shortcuts. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And I think the other thing is his attitude. One of the things he said to me, ma'am, this is what he said to me. And this was probably my last. So this would have been probably in 2017. We were having a conversation. He said, "My time in prison has been priceless." Priceless. He says that. Now, at this point, he's got what, 25 years in. He's been denied that commutation. I mean, and the reason for that is he had such a great opportunity to help people. He had a great opportunity to heal, and he had a great opportunity where he could learn. And I think the teachableness too. I gave him so many books to read. I gave him so many articles, and he just soaked it all up. And he wanted to know all sorts of stuff. And he's really prepared from the foundation up. I think he's healed from the inside out. And I think from the top down, I would say he's really broken for God, which is a good thing, where he's yielded to him, and he's really going to serve God, I believe, the rest of his life and help others, ma'am.
I don't know if you can hear me. I can't get at the table and I'm not near the mic. Can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
I had asked for mic, so I'm sorry about that. But I do want to, it was mentioned about the injustice through the years. I've been here 21 years and I've seen, and Sinelli was outrageous. And that was mentioned, Sinelli.
Yeah.
I voted against that chair.
Oh, thank you.
Just in case of the bribe for the governor when he was campaigning.
Yeah.
So, and there was no follow-up with them. 3 life sentences.
Yeah.
When I see people out there that should be in prison, and not this man, when I think of that monster that took Harmony, that got custody of him, these people are out there on the radar. And
Yeah.
you have this. So your testimony means a lot to me. To
Yeah.
know that Thomas, got very spiritual and sought your help and your advice. How many years did you actually know him?
I can't hear that. I heard what you said. Do I know who?
Yeah, please. I'm sorry. you
How
can't
many
hear.
years, how many years have you known Mr. Koonce?
Oh, I've known him almost 8 years. Almost
Wow.
8 years. Yeah.
Well, thank you for all your guidance and testimony means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor. Before you go, Counselor Paul DiPaolo has a question. I just want to, before I go to Counselor DiPaolo, you mentioned that it's been like so unusual for someone to have, I think, 2D reports where someone's been incarcerated for so long. For the folks who are watching this, you know, on webcam or whatever other source, a D report is a disciplinary report.
Oh, yes, sir.
And I'm
Yes.
going to use
Sorry.
these terms, but the
Sorry.
folks, are trying to make it, I like to make it simple and as easy as I can for the folks who are not here today, but listening. A
Thank
D
you, sir.
report is a disciplinary
Disciplinary
report, and that is unheard of for someone to be incarcerated for that long to only have 2 disciplinary reports, and those disciplinary reports were very, very minor. But I just wanted to clarify that, Pastor. And Counselor DiPaolo has a question for you.
Yes.
Thank you, Pastor, for being here. I think your testimony is an important insight into Mr. Koonce. As you described it, Mr. Koonce sounds like someone who is self-motivated to help and heal and grow, as you put it. That's fair to say from what you told us.
Yes.
So do you think in general that our correctional facilities are conducive to that kind of self-growth and development?
That is a great question, and I would say no. No.
And
And now MCI Norfolk is MCI Norfolk, and this is the sad part about it is, and I think very, very briefly, as I said, the inner healing part, the root of people's issues is really the brokenness. That's what drives the addictions. And the problem is we work on surface behaviors, but if you don't get to the healing part of it, it's not going to stop the addictive behavior. And I think we need a lot of work now. MCI Norfolk, I obviously implemented some things through the chapel. I think the restorative justice program is an amazing program, and they deal with both sides of that. They not only deal with the victims and what happened to the victims, but they also have the a program called Vogue. I believe it's like maybe 34 weeks where they go back to go forward. They process trauma and they allow the men to move towards forgiveness, which ultimately leads to healing. And when that healing comes, the urges for the addictions lessen, the thinking becomes more normal, the emotions become normal, and then the will can really start to apply a lot of the surface life skills that the Department of Correction does a great job with. So the Department of Correction, they have added a few things, but when I had mentioned it to people at the top, it kind of fell on deaf ears. And I told them years ago, I got to speak to a bunch of all the director of treatments who handle the treatments at all the facilities at a meeting. And I said, if guys don't heal, they're going to keep going out and coming back. And even sincere guys who have character, who may even have a work ethic, who have all these life skills, if their inner person is broken, they're going to have, and one of the biggest problems when someone is broken on the inside, sir, is they have relationship problems. And I've seen it 36 years, sir. I was there for 36 years, and I saw it over and over again. And well, what a great question. That's the best question someone's asked here. I know all the questions are important, but all of you had great questions. Thank you so much. But that is an issue. I wish somebody would do something about it. And it doesn't mean being a left-wing liberal or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to lock them up. Any guy in prison who's really gone through the change process will tell you, they'll tell me, thank God I came to prison. I'd probably be dead if I didn't come to prison. Most of my friends are dead who are out there now. This is what they told me. But these are the guys, see, who are doing the work, who are going through the process, and their thinking is starting to straighten out. They're going from, as we say, the solid con to the citizen. That's the person who's working for transformation and change. And so you need both sides. You need law enforcement there. And what I tell other chaplains, let me just mention, this is so important too, sir. For the chaplain, all the chaplains, security is always number one. We must have control in the prison before we can do what we can do. And it's the same thing in society. Before we can help guys heal and get the root causes, they need to be off the streets and locked up first. And then that gets their attention, and then we can help them. But we need to do a better job helping them in the institutions. That's not just state prison, but county, juvenile prisons, all those. Thank you, sir, for that question. Great question. Wow.
Thank you very much. Again, just to keep everybody in the loop, there are 12 witnesses. That's the first of 12. We'll try to finish as many as we can. And then after the 12 witnesses, we do have an assembly with the Lieutenant Governor at 12 o'clock. We will take a break at that point. When we come back, if we probably still have more witnesses, and after the witnesses, Mr. Foley will give a presentation, and then the council, Mr. Koonce can make a presentation. Then the councilors will have questions. I don't know how long we'll go today. We'll go as long as we have to, but I'm looking at the time here, that witness, and you did a great job, Pastor. But if all the witnesses take that long, which is totally fine, we will be back a second day. I just want to keep everyone in the loop, okay? Next, we'll hear from Janet Connors. Good morning. Ms. Connors, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. You had frozen there for a while.
Okay, and if you'd like to say some, have your testimony in support of the commutation of Mr. Koonce.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me get onto the video here. Thank you very much. I haven't prepared a written testimony. I'm just a week out of having major heart surgery. So this is the first time I've been on my computer in over a week, actually. But I am here today from the soul of my heart, actually, in support of Thomas Koonce. I first met Thomas Koonce in the restorative justice program. I was instrumental in helping to get that started as well at Norfolk, MCI Norfolk. He is somebody who stood out to me as a leader. And it was interesting to me what the pastor said, because he was about sort of letting other people get the kind of glory. He has a great humility, and yet he does a lot of good. And I guess for me, being a humble leader is one of the best kinds of leaders, and I see that in him. I first learned that he was coming up for commutation and to have his sentence sort of back to what it should have been in the first place through people in the Suffolk County DA's office, and also through people in the federal court, probation and prosecutor's office. I work in the RISE program at the federal court with men and women who are sentenced in federal crimes. And so I sought out Mr. Foley to ask if there was anything that
Okay. Excuse me.
Ms. Connors.
We can't hear you.
you can't hear me. Okay, can you hear
We
me
can hear you
now?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, okay, I'll lean in then. I'm a survivor of a homicide victim. I don't know what you didn't hear, but I first heard about Thomas coming up for going back to having his sentence be what it should have been in the first place through people in the Suffolk County DA's office who have also been going into the restorative justice program, and people, a federal prosecutor and a federal probation officer. I do some work with the RISE program in the federal court. And so through them, I found out that Thomas was coming up for this. And last December or November, I contacted a year ago. I contacted Mr. Foley, found out who his attorney was, and asked if there was anything that I could do. And so that's why I testified before the advisory board, and I'm proud to testify on his behalf now. He is a very humble leader, as I said. I don't know if you heard that before, but he is a strong leader. And I am a survivor of a homicide victim. I met in a restorative process with two of the young men responsible in my son's murder, my son Joel's murder. And so I do believe strongly in restorative processes, in the idea that we actually look at the impact, that people search their souls to look at the impact of what their actions have had on people, and to try and make amends in the best way that they can. And sometimes that means you can't make that directly to your victim. And I know that's something that makes Thomas's heart ache. But if you can't do it directly, then you do it with other people. So I'm a part of a survivor organization called Legacy Lives On. And many of the Legacy Lives On mothers have gone in to prison as well. And they are also really, really impressed with Thomas Koonce. He's been, ironically, a deep part of my healing and of the healing of other Legacy Lives On members. And he paid a lot of attention when they were first coming up with the Vogue curriculum, when we were first trying to decide on a curriculum. And I had concerns that it really didn't include survivors. He was very instrumental in supporting me, in acknowledging that, but also helping me to understand that, as the pastor said, the men had to go back to go forward, but that he assured me that they would always, always, always have us survivors in their hearts and in their mind as they did this work. He really is a stellar human being. He has done so much work inside with other men through the Second Thoughts program. There are lots of people who I've heard testify on the radio last year, who have been released from prison, who said that Mr. Koonce helped them to change their lives and that they're doing well now. He just exemplifies goodness to me. And that when you do something that's very, very, very wrong and very, very, very hard to forgive, forgiving the unforgivable, he has helped some of us survivors to forgive the unforgivable, even if we weren't directly able to do that with the people who were responsible in our sons' or daughters' murders. I was fortunate that I was able to do that, but some aren't. And it's a reciprocal healing that has happened because of that. And Mrs. Santos is absolutely right when she says that nothing Mr. Koonce has done will ever be enough to bring her son back. Because nothing can bring our sons back, but we can bring our sons forward. And Mr. Koonce lives with that pain, and that he lives with that accountability for the rest of his life. And I do believe that he'll never, ever, ever stop trying to make it enough through his earnest efforts and goodwill to others and to the community. I'm kind of looking a little bit at notes from last time, but there's no justice that can bring Mark Santos back. There is a justice that can free this truly remorseful, remarkable man to do work on the outside, to keep on doing what he does, to keep helping others to change up or to keep another mother from having a broken heart. There is a justice that can free this man to do remarkable actions on the outside. And were he to get out, I would be proud to work with him. Through the restorative justice program, I've had the incredible experience in other restorative justice work that I do of bearing witness to transformation. I believe in redemption. I know that God believes in redemption. And in the end, it's God who has the power higher than any court of the law, any penal institution, board of pardons, advisory council, to judge good or bad, forgiveness or not. It is God who will invite us into the glory of heaven or condemn one to the fury of hell. I look, noting that Tom Koonce has what he has done, can't bring Mark Santos back to his mother and family, but he has kept other mothers from crying our tears. His dedication to goodness and to God and to the work of restoration and transformation has already done that. I can't imagine how much good he can do on the outside. I look forward to having Mr. Koonce sitting with me and his son around my kitchen table. And I really feel like punishment is imposed. It comes down upon you. There are people who serve 40, 50 years in prison and never, ever, ever own their stuff. Accountability rises up from within. It comes from the heart and soul. And this man has shown himself to be truly accountable by helping the ways that he has searched his own soul and has helped others to heal as well. And I do believe in the question of the prisons, and I wonder why can't we have houses of healings? Why can't we have houses of healing? It's called the Department of Corrections, and yet I don't see that a lot of people receive the help that they need to heal, and you have to heal to move forward in a good way. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much, Ms. Connors. Do any of the councilors have any questions of Ms. Connors? Councilor Kennedy has a question.
Just a comment. I want to thank you for your testimony, and I want to thank you specifically for bringing up Mrs. Santos and Mark Santos, who has to be mentioned in this room. Mark Santos was the gentleman who was 24 years old who died on that day. And the pain that the Santos family, I'm sure, has not diminished one iota since that day. I know that I saw that in my own mother and father when my brother was killed by a drunk driver when he was 20 years old. They found forgiveness with the person who was responsible for that, long before we had the term restorative justice.
Yes.
But they lived with it every day of their lives till they each passed away. And it's a pain that does not go away. And I don't, while we're all pleased to have a commutation hearing for Mr. Koonce, and we're all pleased with the things that he has done to seek restorative justice in this particular matter and to improve himself, we have not lost the sight of the fact that Mark Santos died that day.
That's
I think that has to be said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Nicholas Dijonay. Good morning, Mr. Dijonay. We can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Tell him to turn on his mic.
Turn on your mic. We can't hear it. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you. We can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you. My battery almost died. I apologize. Um, my name is Nicholas DeJeanette. I've known Thomas Koonce for about 15 years. Thomas Koonce played a major role in my life. When I was 22 years old, I was sentenced to 15 to 17 years in prison. I am one of the many individuals that Thomas Koonce has affected and has blessed just being around him. I owe Thomas Koonce a lot for me being able to succeed out here in society. I met Thomas Koonce, like I said, about 15 years ago. He is everything that he preaches. Thomas Koonce is not an ordinary individual in any way, shape, or form. While I was incarcerated, he encouraged me to get my education with Boston University. They were only offering education in like 2 schools in Massachusetts. I'm sorry, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? I can't tell if anybody can hear me. I don't hear anybody. Did somebody like give me a head nod or something?
Hi. Is this Nicholas?
Speaking.
Nicholas, yeah, this is Attorney Tom Quinn. I can hear you, but I think I've lost sight of the governor's counselors, so somebody else is not, so I don't know if we've lost the feed from there or, so let's just, can you hear me?
I can, and I'm looking on the list, and I don't see the governor's council here at all.
Yeah, so I don't know what's happened with that.
Technical problem.
Seems like it's on their end, I guess, the technical problem, because I see 3 of us on the screen.
Okay.
So just be patient, I guess. Well,
Yes, yes.